Hello everyone, I'm Ambre Salis and I'm going to present to you one project I've done during my thesis with Thierry, Lengagne and Léna in Lyon. Mobbing behavior is a very common behavior, especially in birds, and most of them, when they mob, produce some specific calls. As you can see here, it's an example for the great tit. First, we have FME notes, frequency modulated elements, that are then followed by a string of D notes. Here you have a simplified spectrogram of the call. And there are two papers made by first Suzuki on the Japanese tit and then Dutour on the great tit that show that this call made of two parts could be a little bit more complex than initially thought. Indeed, if you isolate the FME notes, you have only a vigilance behavior that occurs from the birds. However, if you isolate the D notes, you only have an approach from conspecifics. When you have the complete call, the complete mobbing call, you have both behavior, vigilance and approach behavior that occurs. However, if you reverse the call, you do not have any response anymore, at least less response. So what Suzuki proposed is that maybe this is some kind of compositional syntax in the human sense, which is when the meaning of a sequence is determined both by its different parts and in the way they are combined. So there's a great need of additional information on how Parids process that FMED kind of syntax. So what we proposed here is that we created an experiment trying to understand whether Parids can generalize the FMED kind of rule when they hear a non-sound. So to do that, we created playbacks of the great tits, so the one we already know that has an FMED note combinatorial call and also which is sensitive to the reversion. So it seems that the great tit can process the FMED organization. And we also created playbacks of the black-capped chickadee, which is a species from North America, which is completely unknown to the great tit, and who also possess that FMED organization. So the protocol was that we created playbacks of either isolated FME or isolated D notes or the complete call of both the great tits to have a comparison, and also the black-capped chickadee, which was the one we were very interested in. We also created two controls, which were background noise and chaffinch song. The protocol was very simple. You found the birds, you launched the playbacks, and then you record two behaviors. You record the approach behavior and also the scanning behavior, which is the vigilance behavior, which is when birds move their head from right to left. So our results show that for the vigilance behavior, when you isolated only the FME notes, you do have vigilance behavior towards either the conspecific call in blue and also the heterospecific allopatric one, the black-capped chickadee in green. So that works. For the D notes, we also have that kind of results. However, we do have an increased response toward the conspecific calls, and the unknown heterospecific calls trigger some intermediate response. When you launch playback of the complete call, so FME plus D notes, you do have the scanning behavior and the approaching behavior that occurs. So it seems that altogether great tits are able to respond to unknown mobbing calls, but also to both the isolated FME notes and isolated D notes of an unknown species. So that goes in the direction of compositional syntax in Parids. However, this is not demonstration. We still have some work to do to understand better how they can process and recognize the FMED structure. For example, we need to know whether it works with other species and how they can differentiate FME and D notes. I am currently working on it with the coal tit, which is a species who possess different FME and D notes. So thank you for your attention. I want to thank the three interns, Jean, Charlotte and Julie, that worked with me in the field. And I'm ending with a great picture of birds mobbing and all. And I'll be happy to answer questions on Discord.